When we talk about financial crises in America, we usually start with the Great Depression of 1929 or maybe the Panic of 1907. If you are a real history buff, you might know about the Panic of 1792, where Alexander Hamilton had to bail out Wall Street. But there is a panic that happened before all of them. It was a crisis so strange and so forgotten that most history books don't even give it a name. It wasn't a crash of stocks or bonds or land. It was a crash of pennies. In the summer of 1789, just as George Washington was taking his first steps as president, the United States was hit by a wave of hyperinflation that targeted the poorest people in the country. The value of small change collapsed overnight. Shops closed, riots broke out in food markets, and the cause of this disaster wasn't a foreign enemy or a bad harvest. It was a secret, industrial-scale criminal conspiracy hidden in the woods of New York. This is the story of the Copper Panic of 1789 and the man who almost broke the American economy before it even started. To understand why a crash in copper coins was such a disaster, you have to understand the money of the 1780s. It was a mess. The Revolutionary War was over. But the United States didn't really have a united currency. The wealthy merchants dealt in gold, Spanish milled dollars, or silver coins. But the average person, the farmer, the soldier, the shopkeeper, never saw gold. They lived their lives in copper. They bought bread, beer, and tools using a motley collection of coins, worn-out British halfpennies, state-issued coppers, and a flood of lightweight counterfeit tokens. This chaotic system worked, barely, because people trusted that a copper coin, regardless of its origin, had some intrinsic value based on the metal it contained. This trust was the bedrock of everyday commerce. In the years after the Revolution, the new states tried to solve this currency problem by minting their own official copper coins. States like Connecticut, New Jersey, and Vermont granted contracts to private individuals to produce coppers. These minters were supposed to follow strict standards, making coins with a specific weight and purity. But the temptation to cheat was enormous. Copper was expensive, and the profit margin was slim. If a minter could just make the coins a little bit lighter, using less copper for each one, they could make a fortune. This is where our story's villain enters the picture. His name was James Jarvis, and he was the mastermind behind a scheme that would exploit this fragile system to its breaking point. Jarvis was a classic American operator, ambitious, charming, and utterly ruthless. He secured a contract to mint 3 million pounds of copper coins for the state of Connecticut. But Jarvis wasn't interested in making legitimate coins. He saw a much bigger opportunity. He secretly started producing vast quantities of lightweight counterfeits, almost indistinguishable from the real thing, but containing far less copper. He wasn't alone. He formed a shadowy network of accomplices, including a British machinist named Thomas Mackin. Deep in the woods of New York, near a place called Mackin's Mills, they built a clandestine mint. It was an industrial operation, complete with water-powered machinery, hidden from the eyes of the law. Here, they churned out millions of counterfeit coppers. They copied the designs of the official state coins, but they also created their own crude tokens, all of them underweight. This operation was a direct assault on the nation's monetary foundation. They were, in essence, printing money, but instead of paper, their medium was cheap copper. For a few years, this flood of bad money went mostly unnoticed. The new coppers mixed in with the old ones, and because there was already so much variety in circulation, nobody could really tell the difference. People were just happy to have coins to spend. But James Jarvis had even grander ambitions. He managed to convince the new federal government, under the Articles of Confederation, to grant him a contract to mint the very first federal coins, the Fugio cents. He promised to deliver high-quality coins for the entire nation, but it was all a lie. Jarvis took the government's copper shipment, sailed to Europe, and essentially vanished. He never delivered the federal coins. Instead, he used the resources to expand his illegal minting operations, both in America and now in England. he and his partners began flooding the American market with an unprecedented volume of worthless copper tokens. By 1789, the system was at a tipping point. There were simply too many bad coins in circulation. It was like a game of musical chairs, and the music was about to stop. The crisis began in the summer of 1789. It started in New York and Philadelphia, the nation's commercial hubs. A prominent merchant, sick of being paid in worthless junk, suddenly announced he would no longer accept any copper coins except for the heavy, old British halfpennies. The news spread like wildfire. Panic ensued. Suddenly, everyone was inspecting their pocket change. They realized that the coppers they held, the money they used to buy food and pay for lodging, were worthless. A wave of financial terror swept through the cities. Shopkeepers refused to accept coppers, posting signs in their windows, "Nitrogen monoxide coppers." This brought daily commerce to a halt. If you couldn't use your copper coins, you couldn't buy bread. You couldn't buy meat. Food markets became scenes of chaos. In New York, bakers and butchers who refused to take coppers were threatened by angry mobs. Riots broke out. People who had gone to bed with a pocketful of money woke up to find they were effectively broke. The panic disproportionately hurt the poor. Wealthy merchants could fall back on silver and gold, but laborers, artisans, and soldiers had all their savings in copper. Their life's work evaporated overnight. The newspapers of the day were filled with letters from desperate citizens. One wrote, "The distress it has caused to the poor is beyond description." This was America's first hyperinflationary crisis, a complete collapse in the value of the people's money. The crisis of 1789 revealed a fundamental weakness in the new nation. The government under the Articles of Confederation was too weak to regulate the currency or to stop criminals like James Jarvis. The chaos provided a powerful argument for the men who were advocating for a new, stronger federal government. Men like Alexander Hamilton saw the copper panic as a clear sign that the country needed a national mint and a stable, unified currency controlled by a central authority. In the aftermath, the worthless coppers were eventually driven out of circulation. People started weighing coins or simply refusing them altogether. The crisis ultimately spurred Congress, under the new Constitution, to pass the Coinage Act of 1792. This act established the United States Mint in Philadelphia and created the dollar, the dime, and the cent as the official currency of the land. It was a direct response to the chaos caused by Jarvis and his counterfeiters. It was the beginning of the American monetary system we know today, born from the ashes of a forgotten panic. And what happened to James Jarvis, the man who nearly broke the economy? He remained a fugitive in Europe for years, constantly engaged in new schemes and dodging his creditors. He was a man who flew too close to the sun, a symbol of the unchecked ambition and greed that threatened the fragile American experiment. His conspiracy was ultimately a failure, but it served as a brutal, necessary lesson. It taught America's founding fathers that a nation is not just an army or a constitution. It is also an economy built on a foundation of trust. And that trust, once broken, is the hardest thing to rebuild. The copper panic of 1789 is a forgotten chapter in American history, but its legacy is all around us. Every time you use a dollar or a cent, you are holding a piece of the solution to that first, strange financial crisis. It's a reminder that the stability we take for granted was hard-won, forged in the crucible of a panic over worthless pennies. If you enjoyed this look into a forgotten piece of American history, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We've got more stories of forgotten crises, hidden conspiracies, and the secret history of how our world was made. And let us know in the comments what other hidden parts of history should we explore next.